Hi, it's Jaxon, and in today's video, I'm uncovering the last footage of people before they were eaten by animals. From a dive videographer who vanished beneath murky water after coming face-to-face with a bull shark to a 28-year-old tourist in India who stepped out of her vehicle in tiger territory for a selfie and met a devastating end. It was June 14th, 2015, in a remote stretch of the Luangwa River, eastern Zambia. The afternoon sun sat low over the water, casting long shadows across the muddy banks. The river moved slowly, wide and brown, with patches of reeds along the edges. Dean Collin was 34 years old, a freelance nature photographer from Oregon, traveling through southern Africa for 3 weeks. He had limited experience with African wildlife, but had hired a local guide to take him upriver in a dugout canoe. The guide, a man in his 50s who had worked the river for decades, paddled from the stern while Dean sat in the bow with his camera equipment. They had been on the water for about 2 hours, moving slowly along the western bank. Dean wanted to photograph hippos in their natural habitat. He had seen them from a distance earlier in the trip and wanted closer shots. The guide had warned him repeatedly to keep noise to a minimum and stay at least 50 feet from any animals. Dean had photographed wildlife in North America, elk, bears, bison, but had never worked around hippos. He understood they were dangerous but seemed to believe the canoe provided adequate separation. A faded sign at the put-in point showed a pictogram of a hippo with a red X through a canoe. The hippopotamus is one of the most dangerous animals in Africa, responsible for an estimated 500 human deaths per year across the continent. Adult males weigh between 3,000 and 4,000 pounds and can move quickly through water, propelling themselves along the bottom with powerful leg thrusts. They are highly territorial, easily startled, and will attack without warning if they feel cornered or surprised. A hippo's bite force exceeds 1,800 pounds per square inch, and their canine teeth can grow up to 16 inches long. As they paddled, they passed sections of river where the water rippled and bulged, indicating submerged animals. The guide steered wide around these areas. About 20 minutes before the attack, they heard a deep grunt from ahead, followed by a loud exhalation, a hippo surfacing to breathe. The guide slowed the canoe and pointed to a cluster of dark shapes about 80 feet ahead, partially submerged near a stand of reeds. Dean raised his camera. The guide said they should not get closer, but Dean asked to move just a bit nearer for a better angle. The guide hesitated, then paddled forward slowly, angling toward the middle of the river. The canoe was holding at that distance, drifting slowly in the current. Dean was leaning forward, camera raised, adjusting his lens. Then, with almost no warning, a large male hippo surfaced directly beside the canoe. A single sharp exhale and a churning of water, and then the massive head was already there, less than 10 feet away. The animal had been resting unseen on the riverbed beneath them. It opened its mouth wide in a threat display, then lunged. Its head struck the side of the boat with tremendous force, splintering the wood. The canoe capsized immediately. Dean went into the water on the left side, the guide on the right. He surfaced after 2 seconds and began swimming toward the bank, about 40 feet away. The guide surfaced and swam in the opposite direction, shouting at Dean to swim faster. The hippo turned toward Dean and covered the distance in less than 3 seconds. He was still swimming when the hippo reached him, its massive jaws closing around his upper body from the side. The bite was catastrophic. The hippo's canines punctured deep into Dean's torso, one tusk penetrating his upper back near the shoulder blade, another driving through his chest below the collarbone. The hippo shook its head violently, 2 or 3 powerful jerks, cracking ribs on both sides and tearing through muscle and tissue. Then it bit down with full force. Dean's ribcage collapsed inward, his sternum fractured, and the tusks pierced his lung and heart. Blood filled his chest cavity. His body went limp. The hippo released him. Dean floated face down in the water, motionless. The entire attack lasted less than 15 seconds. Dean's camera had been recording throughout and captured the moment of impact before the canoe capsized. Zambian wildlife authorities recovered it during the operation, but withheld the footage, citing a policy against releasing material that could encourage reckless tourism in restricted river zones. The guide reached the far bank, then swam back to retrieve Dean's body and walked 2 miles to a nearby fishing village for help. Dean's remains were returned to the United States 2 weeks later. Cause of death confirmed as massive crushing trauma and puncture wounds to the heart and lungs. It was October 31st, 2017, and the sprawling grounds of Wildwood Exotic Animal Breeding Facility in rural Ohio lay shrouded in darkness under a moonless Halloween night. The privately owned operation housed over 40 big cats, including tigers, lions, and leopards that were bred for private sales and roadside zoo operations. Derek Thompson walked his familiar maintenance route through the facility, his flashlight cutting through the darkness as the facility's basic security camera system recorded his movements. At 39, Derek was a former Army veteran who had served 2 tours in Afghanistan before finding work as a maintenance technician at the Exotic Animal Facility. He had been working the night shift for 2 years, developing a comfortable routine that involved checking water systems, food storage, and basic enclosure maintenance. Derek took pride in his work and had grown fond of many of the animals under his care, often spending extra time observing their nighttime behaviors. The facility operated under minimal safety protocols, despite the dangerous nature of its residents, with basic backup systems that frequently malfunctioned. Every enclosure featured double-gated entry systems and reinforced fencing, but electronic monitoring was limited and often failed to alert staff to breaches. Derek had been making his routine midnight rounds when he noticed something unusual on his approach to the Siberian tiger enclosure. The outer gate appeared to be slightly ajar, creating a gap that shouldn't have existed according to the facility's basic security protocols. The massive tiger inside, a 400-pound male named Kodiak, had been bred at the facility and was known for his intelligence and strength. Siberian tigers are the largest living cats in the world, with adult males weighing up to 660 pounds and measuring over 10 feet in length. They possess incredible strength, capable of dragging prey weighing twice their body weight for miles through dense forest. These apex predators have evolved as solitary hunters with powerful jaws that can deliver a bite force exceeding 1,000 pounds per square inch. In captivity, tigers retain all their natural hunting instincts and can become extremely dangerous when their routine is disrupted or when they perceive a threat to their territory. Derek approached the tiger enclosure with his standard equipment, a flashlight, radio, and basic knowledge of the facility's protocols. The security cameras captured his methodical approach as he examined the gate mechanism, trying to determine what had caused the apparent malfunction. What Derek didn't realize was that the inner gate had been improperly secured earlier during feeding operations, creating a potential path between Kodiak's sleeping area and the facility's main walkways. The security footage shows Derek reaching for his radio to call the facility owner, but before he could complete the call, Kodiak appeared in the gap between the gates. The massive tiger had been awakened by the unusual activity and was investigating the disturbance to his territory. Derek froze as he found himself face to face with 400 pounds of apex predator. Derek began backing away slowly while reaching for his radio, but his movements triggered Kodiak's hunting instincts. The tiger's body language shifted from curious to aggressive as he identified Derek as a potential threat. Kodiak launched himself through the gap with explosive power, covering the distance to Derek in a single bound. The tiger's massive paws struck Derek in the chest and shoulders, driving him to the ground with bone-crushing force. Derek's flashlight flew from his hand as Kodiak's claws raked across his torso, opening deep gashes that immediately began bleeding profusely. Security cameras captured portions of the horrific attack as Kodiak's jaws clamped down on Derek's shoulder and upper torso. The tiger's 4-inch canine teeth penetrated through muscle and bone, while his powerful neck muscles shook Derek violently. Derek managed to activate his radio during the initial moments of the attack. his desperate calls for help clearly audible on the facility's communication system. Kodiak dragged Derek's body toward the tiger enclosure, displaying the territorial behavior that made these predators so dangerous in captivity. The attack continued for a minute, as the tiger's natural killing instincts drove him to ensure his victim was completely subdued. Derek's movements gradually ceased as massive trauma and blood loss overwhelmed his system. Emergency responders arrived to find Kodiak had returned to his enclosure area, where he remained agitated from the encounter. County sheriff's deputies and wildlife officers surrounded the facility as emergency protocols were activated. After failed attempts to safely contain the situation, law enforcement was forced to shoot Kodiak when he showed continued aggressive behavior toward rescue personnel attempting to reach Derek's body. The investigation revealed that the inner gate had been improperly secured during evening feeding operations, while Derek's decision to investigate the enclosure alone had violated basic safety protocols. The facility's inadequate safety systems and poor maintenance procedures had created the conditions that led to the fatal encounter. The security footage became evidence in subsequent legal proceedings against the facility owner, who was later charged with felony negligence following a prolonged investigation and multiple OSHA violations. Derek's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit, and the facility was permanently closed following extensive state and federal investigations into its operations. It was July 18, 2015, when the Trinity River floodplain in Texas became the scene of a deadly encounter. The recent flooding had transformed the landscape, creating new channels and expanding the territory where American alligators could hunt. The muddy banks were littered with debris, and the water moved with a deceptive calm that masked the dangers lurking beneath the surface. Fallen trees created natural blinds, where predators could remain completely hidden from unsuspecting visitors. The flooding had displaced the alligators' usual prey and expanded their hunting range, increasing the likelihood of unexpected human encounters in unfamiliar territory. Water levels remained elevated, creating perfect conditions for ambush attacks. Lawson Krell, a 41-year-old freelance wildlife videographer, had built his reputation on capturing reptiles in their natural habitat. Known for his close-range filming techniques and minimal use of safety barriers, Krell specialized in documenting behavior that other photographers wouldn't dare attempt. He had arrived at the Trinity River specifically to film post-flood alligator activity, aware that the expanded waterways had drawn these apex predators into new feeding territories. His previous work included dangerous encounters with venomous snakes and large crocodilians, experiences that had perhaps given him false confidence in his ability to read dangerous situations. Krell had been monitoring activity in a known basking and feeding area for several hours, noting its hunting patterns and territorial behavior. The animal showed increased movement and reduced avoidance of human activity, a common effect of flooding that forces alligators into unfamiliar areas where they must re-establish their routines and boundaries. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the water as Krell positioned his chest-mounted action camera. The river current had slowed from its earlier torrent, creating what appeared to be ideal filming conditions. Several feet offshore, an adult American alligator remained completely submerged, its body aligned parallel to the shoreline where Krell stood. The animal's eyes and nostrils were barely visible above the waterline, a hunting position perfected over millions of years of evolution. American alligators are among North America's most formidable predators, capable of explosive bursts of speed, both in water and on land. These ancient reptiles can surge laterally and forward from concealment with explosive force, using powerful tail-driven thrusts to close short distances in fractions of a second. Their bite force can exceed 2,000 pounds per square inch at the back of the jaw, under laboratory measurements. And once they secure a grip, their instinct is to drag prey into deeper water, where they can perform their signature death roll. Large adult males can reach lengths of 11 to 12 feet, and weigh between 700 and 900 pounds, making them virtually unstoppable once they commit to an attack. Krell made a fatal miscalculation as he stood at the water's edge during peak feeding hours. He assumed the shallow depth would limit the alligator's strike range, not realizing that these predators are perfectly adapted to hunt from seemingly impossible positions. The murky water concealed the animal's exact location and body positioning, while the recent flooding had brought both predator and potential prey into closer proximity than either would typically encounter. His positioning directly in the strike zone violated every safety protocol for wildlife filming. Without warning, the alligator surged forward in a powerful tail-driven burst from the shallows, covering the short distance in a fraction of a second. Its massive jaws clamped down on Krell's lower leg with bone-crushing force, the conical, interlocking teeth penetrating deep into muscle and bone. The sudden impact and overwhelming power pulled him off balance, sending him crashing into the muddy water. The alligator maintained its devastating grip and dragged its victim toward deeper water, adjusting its hold with mechanical precision. As the water depth increased, the animal began a controlled rolling maneuver, using its body weight and rotational force to disorient and weaken its prey. Each revolution drove them further from shore and deeper underwater, while the alligator's grip remained absolutely secure. The rolling motion served to overwhelm and incapacitate the victim, preventing any coordinated escape attempt. The alligator held Krell submerged for extended periods between rotations. According to the subsequent investigation, death occurred rapidly due to drowning compounded by severe traumatic injury from the initial bite and subsequent attack. The combination of crushing bite force, submersion, and the physical trauma of being rolled repeatedly proved unsurvivable. The alligator abandoned the body after prolonged submersion, likely disturbed by environmental changes or nearby activity, allowing it to drift downstream, where it was later recovered. The incident prompted a comprehensive investigation, leading to enhanced warning systems along flood-prone waterways. It was March 2nd, 2016. The midday sun blazing over the sal forests of Bandhavgarh National Park in Madhya Pradesh, India, when Imogen Carroll climbed into a safari jeep for what would be her final photograph. Imogen was a 28-year-old marketing coordinator from Portland, Oregon, traveling alone through India. She had arrived at Bandhavgarh 3 days earlier, specifically for the park's reputation as one of India's premier tiger reserves, boasting one of the highest densities of Bengal tigers in the world. Her stated goal, repeated to multiple guides and fellow tourists, was to get a photograph with a tiger closer than anyone else she knew had managed. Her afternoon guide, Rajesh Kumar, a 15-year park veteran, later noted in his logbook that Imogen had been persistently demanding during the booking process. She requested routes near recent tiger sightings and repeatedly asked about exiting the vehicle. When Kumar explained that leaving the jeep was strictly forbidden, covered in the standard safety briefing, and carried legal penalties and mortal risk, Imogen smiled and said she understood. Male Bengal tigers can weigh more than 500 pounds and measure up to 10 feet. Adult tigresses are typically much lighter, often between roughly 220 and 350 pounds. They possess extremely powerful bites and can accelerate to 40 miles per hour in short bursts. Most critically, tigers are ambush predators, evolved to strike from concealment with explosive force aimed at the neck and head of their prey. That morning, park officials had closed the Southern Loop Trail following reports of a tigress with cubs exhibiting territorial behavior. Signs in Hindi and English were posted at the gate, and all registered guides had been notified via radio. Kumar showed Imogen the closure notice and explained they would take an alternate route. According to statements from the 3 other passengers in the jeep, a German couple and an Australian woman, Imogen argued for 20 minutes, insisting they had paid for the premium tiger experience and demanding to see areas where tigers had been recently spotted. Kumar chose to skirt the boundary of the closed zone, closer than protocol allowed and later reviewed internally. Around 1:15 p.m., he stopped after spotting movement in tall grass about 70 yards from the trail. Through binoculars, he identified an adult tigress, partially concealed. Passengers raised their cameras. Imogen, seated rear left, complained the tiger was too distant and obscured, repeatedly urging Kumar to move closer and raising her voice when he refused. The Australian passenger later stated that Imogen then stood up in the jeep, leaning over the roll bar to get a better angle. Kumar ordered her to sit down. She complied briefly. But within seconds, she stepped onto the running board and reached for the low side rail. The German man sitting beside her grabbed her arm. But Imogen shook him off and positioned herself standing in the open side of the vehicle, one foot on the running board, her body leaning outward. She raised her phone at arm's length, angling for a selfie with the tiger visible behind her. Kumar shouted at her in both Hindi and English. The other passengers were yelling. Imogen was focused on her phone screen, adjusting the angle. The tigress, which had been partially concealed in the grass, had gone completely still. A behavioral shift Kumar recognized immediately as pre-attack focus, consistent with a defensive response from a tigress protecting cubs. Seated in the front, he reached back to grab Imogen and pull her inside. But he was too far away and too late. The tigress exploded from the undergrowth with a speed that erased the distance in under 4 seconds. The tiger launched forward and upward at the last moment, aimed with predatory precision at the human standing exposed in the doorway. The impact drove Imogen backward into the Jeep's interior, the tigress's front paws and claws making contact with her upper chest and shoulder. One massive paw struck the side of Imogen's face and neck with crushing force. The Jeep rocked violently, slamming the German man into the opposite rail and throwing the Australian passenger forward against the seat frame. The tiger's jaws closed around Imogen's head. The Australian passenger had been recording video on her phone. The footage, later reviewed by investigators, was handheld and violently shaking, but captured the moment of contact. The audio, though chaotic, was clear enough to reconstruct the timeline. The tigress maintained her grip for approximately 8 seconds, briefly shaking and repositioning her bite before letting go and dropping back to the ground. Kumar grabbed his radio immediately, calling park control with an emergency code. The other passengers were screaming, with the German woman reporting pain and visible contusions to her shoulder and upper arm from the impact. He started the engine and backed away quickly but cautiously, putting distance between the vehicle and the tigress without further provoking her. Park rangers, already stationed near the closed southern loop, reached Kumar's location in about 8 minutes. During that interval, Imogen displayed sporadic, agonal breathing and reflexive movements for under a minute before all visible signs of circulation ceased. A ranger with emergency medical training later confirmed absence of vital signs following this brief period of terminal activity. A local forensic medical officer later recorded multiple skull fractures, severe compression, and tearing of cervical vessels consistent with neck compression, and extensive lacerations to the scalp and face. The primary cause of death was massive cranial trauma and rapid blood loss. Park officials obtained copies of the video footage from the Australian passenger, securing it under investigation protocols. The tigress, identified by her stripe pattern, was closely monitored for weeks but not relocated, as officials determined she had acted defensively toward a perceived threat near her territory. It was August 7, 2015, and the late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the shallow creek near Valdez, Alaska, where Harlan Jove was in water, teaching his youngest daughter how to cast a line. Harlan was a 42-year-old construction foreman from Anchorage. His co-workers knew him as steady and reliable, someone who arrived early and stayed late to ensure jobs were done right. He had 3 children, Mila, 8, Garrett, 10, and Devon, 12, and had planned this weekend trip for months, wanting to create lasting memories before school started. His own father had taken him fishing in these same waters decades earlier, and Harlan wanted to pass down that tradition. The trip was meant to be simple. Harlan had packed a modest cooler, a small tackle box filled with lures and hooks, and wore his faded orange jacket that had accompanied him on countless hunting and fishing expeditions. He had also brought a small GoPro camera, which he mounted on a flat rock near the water earlier that afternoon, to record the children's catches and their first successful casts. The creek ran clear and shallow, between spruce-lined banks, its water sparkling over smooth stones where salmon struggled upstream during their late summer run. Posted signs at the trailhead clearly warned of increased bear activity, advising hikers to make noise, travel in groups, and carry bear spray. Grizzly bears in the Valdez region weigh between 400 and 800 pounds and are drawn to these creeks during salmon season, foraging along streams where fish are most concentrated. When surprised or when defending territory or food sources, their attacks are swift and devastating. The bears often approach downwind, using natural cover to mask their presence until they are dangerously close. Harlan had left the bear spray in his truck. The kids later said that the reasoning for this was that the noise from the 3 excited children would be deterrent enough, according to their dad. Park rangers had specifically noted heightened grizzly presence in that drainage just days earlier, information posted at the ranger station Harlan had driven past without stopping. As the family fished, the children scattered along the bank, throwing sticks and rocks into the water, their laughter carrying across the stream, all of it visible in the wide frame of the GoPro's steady recording. Harlan bent over to untangle a fishing line that had snagged on submerged branches, stepping closer to dense brush that crowded the water's edge. A low growl rumbled from the tree line, barely audible over the stream's gurgling. The eldest said that Harlan glanced up briefly, saw movement in the shadows, but dismissed it as likely a moose or caribou. He turned back to the tangled line. The children continued throwing rocks upstream, unaware that their activity was disturbing a large female grizzly that had been feeding on a salmon carcass just beyond the bend. The bear was likely surprised by Harlan's close approach to her feeding site, and she moved slowly through the underbrush, using the wind and terrain to approach undetected, first appearing at the edge of the GoPro's frame as a shifting shadow in the background. Harlan remained focused on the water, scooping at a small salmon with his hands, while his children called encouragement from the bank. The bear emerged from the tree line 30 yards away, her approach partially visible as she crossed into the camera's field of view. The grizzly covered the distance in seconds, her paws hitting the water in explosive splashes. Harlan turned just as she collided with him, her momentum driving him backward into the creek. Her claws raked across his torso, shredding the orange jacket and the flesh beneath in 4 parallel gashes. The impact knocked the air from his lungs. His children began screaming immediately, frozen in place on the bank. The bear clamped onto Harlan's shoulder, biting through jacket, skin, and muscle to the bone. The children said she shook him violently, whipping his body through the shallow water as blood spread in thin clouds. He tried to crawl toward the bank, slipping on smooth stones, but the grizzly flipped him onto his back and slashed his chest and abdomen. His screams echoed off the canyon walls as she bit repeatedly at his neck and shoulder. Mila stood trembling at the water's edge as the GoPro continued recording, the bear's head blocking parts of the view. Within minutes, the bear dragged Harlan's limp body onto the bank, leaving a dark trail across gravel and moss. The attack lasted under 3 minutes. After subduing him, she released the body and retreated into the brush. A hiker downstream heard the children's screams and tried calling authorities, but poor reception delayed contact. He reached the scene, moved the children away, and kept trying until help arrived about 40 minutes later. Harlan was pronounced dead at the scene from blood loss and trauma. The grizzly was tracked by wildlife officers, but ultimately not destroyed, as officials determined she had acted defensively in response to the family's proximity to her feeding area. The creek was temporarily closed to recreational use. It was March 15, 2015, when tragedy struck at Crocosaurus Cove, one of Darwin's premier wildlife attractions. The facility, home to over 30 massive saltwater crocodiles, sits in the heart of Australia's Northern Territory, where these apex predators have ruled the waterways for millions of years. The morning sun cast long shadows across the main display lagoon, a concrete habitat designed to house the park's most impressive specimens. The humid tropical air carried the distinctive scent of the wetlands, while tourists began gathering for the day's first feeding demonstration. Noah Whitfield, a 40-year-old maintenance supervisor, had worked at Crocosaurus Cove for 5 years. Known for his efficiency and shortcuts, the divorced father of 2 was eager to finish his weekly cleaning duties early to attend his son's afternoon baseball game. His colleague Miguel Santos had offered assistance that morning, but Noah dismissed the help, confident he could handle the routine walkway maintenance alone. Park Safety Inspector Janet Morrison had repeatedly flagged the deteriorating wooden railings for replacement, creating ongoing tension with Noah, who viewed her concerns as excessive caution. The elevated walkway system, positioned 12 feet above the crocodile habitat, required regular pressure washing to remove algae and debris that accumulated from the tropical climate. Noah's supervisor had recently praised his work ethic, unaware that his employees' rush to complete tasks was compromising safety protocols. Saltwater crocodiles are the world's largest living reptiles, with adult males typically reaching lengths of 14 to 17 feet and weighing between 880 to 1,100 pounds, though exceptional specimens can approach 18 feet. These prehistoric predators possess the strongest bite force of any animal on Earth, capable of exerting pressure exceeding 3,700 pounds per square inch. Their hunting strategy relies on explosive ambush attacks, remaining motionless for hours before striking with lightning speed. In captive environments, feeding schedules create heightened states of anticipation and aggression among the population. The crocodiles at Crocosaurus Cove had been conditioned to associate human activity with feeding time, making them particularly responsive to disturbances. As Noah positioned his pressure washer near the compromised railing, the high-pressure water stream created vibrations that stressed the already weakened support posts. The wooden barrier suddenly splintered with a sharp crack, sending Noah tumbling backward through the air. He plummeted 12 feet into the murky water below, crashing directly into the center of the display pond with a tremendous splash. The impact momentarily stunned him, but he quickly surfaced, gasping and disoriented among 32 saltwater crocodiles that had been anticipating their morning feeding. The sound of his fall had alerted every predator in the enclosure, their primitive brains instantly recognizing the disturbance as a potential feeding opportunity. The crocodiles interpreted Noah's thrashing movements as prey behavior. Titan, the dominant 16-foot male, struck first with devastating force. His massive jaws clamped down on Noah's left leg, the bone-crushing bite shattering his femur and severing major arteries. The death roll began immediately, spinning Noah's body violently underwater as blood clouded the murky water. A second crocodile seized his right arm, its powerful jaws crushing bones and tearing through muscle tissue. A third predator grabbed his torso, puncturing his ribcage and collapsing his lung. The coordinated assault created a feeding frenzy as more crocodiles joined the attack, their prehistoric instincts driving them to compete for the unexpected meal. The feeding response escalated as more crocodiles converged on the scene. Noah's screams were cut short as he was repeatedly dragged beneath the surface, the coordinated assault dismembering his body through multiple death rolls. His spine snapped under the tremendous rotational forces, while massive blood loss from severed limbs caused rapid cardiovascular collapse. The churning water turned crimson as the prehistoric predators continued their relentless attack. Within 3 minutes, Noah had succumbed to massive trauma, blood loss, and drowning. Park security arrived to find only fragments of clothing and blood visible on the water's surface. The facility's security cameras had captured the entire incident in horrifying detail, documenting Noah's final moments as he was overwhelmed by the very predators he had worked around for years. An immediate investigation was launched by Northern Territory Workplace Safety Authorities, focusing on the facility's maintenance protocols and safety equipment failures. The park was temporarily closed to visitors, while investigators examined the scene. Noah's family expressed devastation at the loss, describing him as a dedicated father who had simply been trying to provide for his children. The incident prompted renewed scrutiny of wildlife facility safety standards across Australia, with calls for mandatory safety harnesses and improved barrier maintenance protocols. The tragedy served as a stark reminder of the inherent dangers faced by those working in close proximity to apex predators. While Noah Whitfield met his fate in the controlled environment of a wildlife park, other encounters with these apex predators occur in their natural domain. In the remote wilderness of Kakadu National Park, where ancient waterways harbor some of Australia's largest saltwater crocodiles, a different kind of tragedy would soon unfold, involving a man whose illegal activities would lead him into the territory of an 18-foot territorial male known as Magnus. It was March 19, 2017, in a tidal estuary along the coast of the Northern Territory, Australia, approximately 40 miles east of Darwin. The estuary was wide and shallow, bordered by mangroves and mudflats. The tide was coming in, the current moving slowly upstream. The afternoon was hot and humid, around 91 degrees Fahrenheit, with a hazy sky and little breeze. Noel Warren was 52 years old, a commercial fisherman who had worked the waters of the Northern Territory for nearly 30 years. He was experienced, knowledgeable, and cautious by nature. He fished alone most days, preferring independence. He had anchored his small 14-foot aluminum boat in a narrow channel where barramundi were known to gather during the incoming tide, checking crab pots he had set earlier in the week. Noel had decades of experience in crocodile country. He knew to stay in the boat, avoid leaning over the side, and keep his hands and feet inside. He carried a knife on his belt and a gaff hook in the boat, though he knew these would be of limited use against a large crocodile. The area was known to have a high crocodile population, with signs at nearby boat ramps warning against swimming or wading. Noel had seen a massive crocodile, easily 15 feet long, in this very estuary 2 weeks earlier, and had moved to a different spot. The saltwater crocodile is the largest living reptile, with adult males reaching 14 to 17 feet and exceeding 1,000 pounds. They are apex predators and ambush hunters of extraordinary patience, capable of remaining motionless and partially submerged for hours with only their eyes and nostrils above the surface. Their strike is explosive. Once they have a grip, they perform a death roll, spinning rapidly along their longitudinal axis to disorient, drown, and dismember prey. A saltwater crocodile's bite force is among the strongest of any animal, estimated at over 3,700 pounds per square inch. Around 3:30 p.m., Noel pulled in one of his crab pots, tangled with weed and debris. As he cleared it, he heard a faint splash behind him, about 20 feet away. He glanced back but saw nothing, just flat brown water and the distant mangroves. Minutes later, he stood to cast his line toward deeper water near the far bank. The line went taut almost immediately. He stood again to get better leverage and leaned slightly over the side to check the line's angle in the water. The crocodile had been motionless in the water, less than 15 feet from the boat for some time, submerged with only its eyes and nostrils at the surface, invisible against the dark, debris-laden water. It was a large male, approximately 15 feet long and close to 1,000 pounds. When Noel leaned over the side, bringing his upper body within reach, the crocodile moved, propelling itself forward with a powerful thrust of its tail, closing the distance in under 2 seconds. It lunged from the water, jaws open wide. Noel saw it at the last instant, a massive dark shape surging upward, but had no time to react. The jaws closed around his right arm and shoulder. The bite was immediate and crushing. He shouted and tried to pull back, but the crocodile's weight and momentum dragged him over the side of the boat. He hit the water and went under. The crocodile rolled, spinning in rapid, violent rotation, twisting Noel with it. His shoulder dislocated, his humerus fractured, and the soft tissue began to tear catastrophically. He surfaced briefly, gasping, then went under again as the crocodile rolled a second time, then a third, then more. The force of each rotation compounded the damage, muscle separating from bone, tendons severing, the joint destroyed beyond function. Blood clouded the water. Noel could not surface. Water filled his mouth and nose. His body went limp. The crocodile dragged him deeper into the channel before eventually releasing him. Noel drowned. His body drifted along the muddy bottom with the current. Noel's bow-mounted action camera recorded the entire attack. Authorities retained the footage but withheld it permanently at the formal request of his family, who were briefed on its contents and chose not to have it released under any circumstance. His boat was found the next morning, drifting unanchored, blood smeared across the gunwale and bench seat. A search and recovery operation began within hours, but the water's poor visibility made progress slow. Divers worked the channel over several days with little result. Noel's body was finally recovered 5 days later, 2 miles downstream, lodged in the roots of a mangrove tree. His right arm was missing, consistent with post-mortem feeding activity in the days the body spent in the water. The medical examiner ruled the primary cause of death as drowning, with massive soft tissue damage and crush injuries to the right arm and shoulder as contributing factors. It was June 14, 2015, and the crystal-clear waters surrounding Australia's Neptune Islands shimmered under the Southern Ocean sun as Dr. Amanda Foster prepared for what would be her final research dive. The remote location, situated off the coast of South Australia, was renowned as one of the world's premier great white shark research sites, attracting marine biologists from around the globe who sought to study these apex predators in their natural habitat. At 32, Dr. Foster was a respected marine biologist who had dedicated her career to understanding great white shark behavior and ecology. She had earned her doctorate before specializing in shark research that had taken her to dangerous waters around the world. Foster was known among her colleagues for her willingness to take calculated risks to obtain unprecedented footage and data that other researchers couldn't access. Foster had been conducting research as part of a small team funded by a major marine conservation organization, using state-of-the-art underwater camera equipment to document great white feeding behaviors around seal colonies. Her research vessel was equipped with a protective shark cage and remote-operated camera systems that allowed her to observe and record shark behavior while maintaining a safe distance from these powerful predators. The Neptune Islands represented the perfect laboratory for Foster's research, as the area's large seal population attracted numerous great white sharks throughout the year. Foster had been documenting feeding patterns and social interactions between sharks for several weeks, building a comprehensive database of behavioral observations. Great white sharks are among the ocean's most formidable predators, with adults reaching lengths of up to 20 feet and weights exceeding 5,000 pounds. They possess incredible speed and agility despite their massive size, capable of breaching completely out of the water when attacking prey. Their powerful jaws contain multiple rows of razor-sharp teeth designed for gripping and tearing flesh, while their keen senses allow them to detect blood and electrical fields from great distances. Foster had been working from her protective cage when her primary underwater camera system malfunctioned, displaying error messages that indicated a critical failure in the recording equipment. The malfunction threatened to compromise weeks of valuable research data, and Foster faced the difficult decision of whether to abort the dive or attempt to repair the equipment manually. The team decided that Foster would move partially outside the cage perimeter while maintaining visual contact with the team, following established protocols for cage exit procedures. However, during the maintenance operation, Foster's safety tether failed due to a connection point that had been improperly secured by a team member. The ROV camera system continued recording as Foster found herself unexpectedly separated from the protective cage while attempting to complete the equipment repair. Foster worked frantically to swim back toward the safety of the cage, unaware that a massive 16-foot great white shark was approaching from the depths below her position. The blood scent from a recent seal kill in the area had attracted this particular predator to investigate the vicinity, and Foster's movements in the water had triggered its attention. The ROV footage captured the moment when the great white shark detected Foster's presence and began its attack approach. The massive predator rose from the depths with incredible speed, its powerful tail propelling it upward toward the exposed researcher. Foster remained focused on reaching the cage, completely unaware of the approaching danger until the final seconds. The shark struck Foster from below with devastating force, its massive jaws clamping down across her lower torso and hip region in a catastrophic investigatory bite. The impact drove Foster upward through the water column as the shark's razor-sharp teeth penetrated through her wetsuit and deep into her flesh. Foster's regulator was torn from her mouth as the shark's powerful bite crushed bones and severed major arteries throughout her torso. The great white shark released Foster after the initial bite and circled away, following its natural hunting pattern of bite and release investigation. However, the massive blood loss from Foster's injuries began immediately compromising her ability to swim or maintain consciousness. The catastrophic damage from the shark's bite had severed multiple major arteries, causing rapid exsanguination that made survival impossible even with immediate medical intervention. The research vessel's crew discovered the attack when Foster failed to respond to surface communications, and an emergency signal was triggered moments later when her line went slack. The ROV camera footage provided clear evidence of what had occurred, showing Foster's accidental separation from the cage and the shark's natural investigatory response to her presence in the water. Foster's personal camera equipment was destroyed on impact during the attack. The marine biology community was devastated by the loss of such a promising researcher, and Foster's death led to enhanced safety protocols for shark research operations worldwide. The incident highlighted the extreme dangers of working with apex predators and the critical importance of maintaining equipment integrity during cage exit procedures. It was September 2nd, 2016, when a wildlife park in Limpopo Province, South Africa, became the scene of a fatal encounter. The private facility housed several species of African predators in large enclosures connected by service corridors used for maintenance and feeding operations. The early morning air was crisp, and the animals were displaying heightened activity levels as feeding time approached. The park's layout included multiple security gates and barriers designed to separate staff from the dangerous animals during routine operations. However, recent equipment malfunctions combined with manual overrides had created dangerous safety vulnerabilities that required immediate attention before public hours began. The facility had experienced several minor incidents in recent months, raising concerns about aging infrastructure and failing alarm systems. Mindy Gantz, a 34-year-old wildlife park maintenance supervisor, had worked at the facility for over 6 years. Known among her colleagues for taking procedural shortcuts to save time, Gantz was experienced in handling the complex gate systems and security protocols. She had been called in early that morning to inspect a faulty service gate that provided access to one of the lion holding areas. Her reputation for efficiency often came at the cost of following complete safety procedures, a habit that had been noted in previous performance reviews but never formally addressed. Gantz had successfully completed hundreds of similar maintenance tasks without incident, creating a false sense of security about the risks involved. The lions had experienced delayed feeding the previous day, lowering their tolerance to intrusion and increasing food-driven responsiveness. Gantz was aware of the feeding schedule disruption, but felt confident in her ability to quickly assess and repair the malfunctioning gate mechanism. The animals had been pacing restlessly throughout the night, displaying clear signs of hunger-driven aggression. The service corridor she entered was equipped with fixed security cameras that recorded all maintenance activities. The area was designed with multiple fail-safe systems, including primary and secondary gates, that were supposed to ensure complete separation between staff and animals during inspections. Lions are apex predators perfectly evolved for cooperative hunting and overwhelming prey through coordinated attacks. Adult lions possess incredible strength, with males weighing up to 420 pounds and capable of generating bite forces estimated between 600 and 650 pounds per square inch. Their powerful limbs can deliver devastating blows, while their retractable claws can inflict deep lacerations. When hunting as a group, lions employ sophisticated tactics, where one animal typically secures the prey while others assist in the kill. Their natural instinct is to target the neck and throat area, using their powerful jaws to clamp down on vital structures and induce asphyxiation. The sustained pressure from a throat bite restricts airflow and blood circulation to the brain, leading to rapid unconsciousness and death. Gantz made a critical error by entering the restricted corridor alone without following proper verification procedures. She failed to ensure that the secondary gate was fully engaged and locked, assuming the malfunctioning primary gate would provide adequate protection. Investigators later determined that disabled warning indicators and a compromised alarm system had created a cascading failure in the safety protocols. As she examined the gate mechanism, 2 adult lions managed to enter the service corridor through the compromised secondary barrier. The animals advanced through the corridor while constant machinery noise likely masked the sound of their approach. Their hunger-driven state made them more opportunistic and aggressive than usual. The first lion struck without warning, using its massive paw to knock Gantz to the concrete floor. The impact was devastating, sending her sprawling and immediately compromising her ability to escape. Before she could recover, the second lion moved in to secure her upper body. According to the incident report based on security footage analysis, the combined weight of both animals overwhelmed any possibility of resistance. The lions positioned themselves to prevent escape, with one animal delivering what appeared to be a sustained bite to the neck area, the typical killing method employed by lions to induce asphyxiation through jaw pressure on the throat and windpipe. The attack continued as the lions maintained their hold. While the animal's claws inflicted multiple wounds, the fatal mechanism was consistent with asphyxiation, resulting from the sustained bite pressure to the neck region. Movement ceased within minutes as respiratory failure proved fatal. The lions remained with the body until park staff discovered the scene during routine morning checks. The incident triggered an immediate investigation by wildlife authorities, resulting in enhanced safety protocols and mandatory buddy system requirements for all maintenance operations. The park faced significant legal challenges and was temporarily closed pending safety improvements. Gantz's family filed wrongful death lawsuits citing inadequate safety measures and poor equipment maintenance. The case highlighted the ongoing risks faced by wildlife facility workers and led to industry-wide safety reforms. It was August 11th, 2017. The evening sun casting long shadows through the lodgepole pines of Jasper National Park in Alberta, when Colton Moreau stepped out of his tent for the last time. Colton was a 34-year-old electrician from Edmonton, a quiet man known among friends for his steady work ethic and occasional dry humor. This weekend trip to Jasper had been planned for weeks with his longtime friend, Marcus Gatz, as a low-key escape from the city. The two men had arrived at the Whistler's campground, a front country site with designated tent pads, fire rings, and centralized bear lockers, around 4:30 p.m. They paid at the self-registration kiosk, where prominent signage warned visitors of recent black bear activity in the area, with instructions to cook only in designated areas, secure all food and other scented items in bear lockers immediately after use, and carry bear spray at all times. American black bears can weigh up to and over 600 pounds, with females typically smaller than males. They are highly food-motivated and possess an extraordinary sense of smell, which in ideal conditions allows them to detect food odors from up to a mile away. While generally less aggressive than grizzlies, black bear sows with cubs are extremely protective and account for the majority of defensive attacks on humans. As Colton and Marcus set up tents on adjacent pads, the late afternoon stayed calm and warm. Marcus said they cooked hot dogs and canned beans on a camp stove near the fire ring, finishing around 7 p.m. Cleanup was rushed. He later admitted they focused more on the beer cooler than washing dishes. Plates and utensils were lightly rinsed with minimal soap and left on the picnic table, leaving scented items exposed, while the cooler was secured in a bear locker about 20 yards away. The smell of cooked meat lingered around the site. Marcus had been casually recording short video clips throughout the evening on his phone, capturing Colton setting up the tent, making various jokes. The footage showed a relaxed atmosphere, two friends enjoying an ordinary camping trip. Marcus walked toward the communal restroom area, leaving Colton sitting in a folding chair outside his tent. Colton had his bear spray stored inside the tent. 3 campsites away, a family with young children suddenly shouted warnings. A woman's voice carried clearly through the trees, yelling that a bear was coming through the sites. Marcus, still holding his phone, turned and saw the black bear sow emerge from the tree line, roughly 40 yards behind Colton's tent. 2 cubs scrambled up a nearby pine tree. The sow, estimated later at around 250 pounds, moved with purpose between the campsites. Colton stood up from his chair and turned toward the commotion. Marcus, who had instinctively raised his phone to record, captured Colton's reaction as he spotted the bear. The video showed Colton taking 2 steps backward toward his tent, then freezing as the sow accelerated into a charge. She closed the distance with startling speed, covering approximately 30 feet in less than 3 seconds. Colton raised his arms defensively. The bear did not slow. The phone footage ended abruptly as the sow made contact, the image jerking violently before going black. Marcus later stated he dropped the phone as he began shouting and retreating, understanding that approaching could trigger a second defensive charge. From his position now roughly 40 yards away, he witnessed the rest of the attack clearly. The sow hit Colton with her full body weight, the impact driving him backward to the ground near the tent's entrance. She pinned him flat on his back, her forelimbs braced on his shoulders, keeping him immobilized against the ground. The attack continued for approximately 25 to 35 seconds. After briefly stepping back for a moment, she re-engaged, lunging forward once more to deliver additional head-directed bites before disengaging. The sow stepped back, huffing and swinging her head toward the tree where her cubs had retreated. Colton lay motionless on his back. His face and scalp were severely torn. The bear circled once, then moved back toward the tree line. Marcus and 2 other campers who had witnessed the attack from nearby sites began shouting for help, while maintaining distance from both Colton and the bear. Multiple people called the wildlife emergency dispatch simultaneously. Rangers and emergency medical services arrived within 10 minutes, approximately 9 minutes after the first call. They secured the area with noise deterrents and confirmed the sow and cubs had moved away from the immediate vicinity. Paramedics reached Colton and found him unresponsive with no pulse. He had sustained massive trauma to the skull, face, and scalp, with deep bite wounds consistent with multiple head bites and claw lacerations to both arms and hands. Bleeding from head wounds had been severe. He was pronounced dead at the scene at 9:04 p.m. The medical examiner's report later confirmed that Colton had died from catastrophic cranial trauma and rapid blood loss. Authorities closed the campground for 72 hours, while wildlife officers tracked the sow and cubs, documented the scene, and collected witness statements. The bears were not euthanized, as the attack was deemed defensive maternal behavior. Marcus declined media interviews. His phone was recovered, its footage copied under chain of custody, and reviewed by investigators. It was December 2nd, 2018, the morning air crisp and cool as 3 men entered the dense woodlands of Kanha National Park in Madhya Pradesh, India. Devraj Sinha was a 29-year-old schoolteacher from Raipur. He taught biology at a private secondary school, where students remembered him as passionate. His photography had been featured in 2 regional magazines, and he was obsessed with the idea of getting published nationally. His colleagues said that this trip to Kanha was meant to produce portfolio-worthy shots of untouched forest interiors. Devraj had convinced 2 friends, Nikhil and Arjun, to join him for the weekend trek. He carried a Canon DSLR, a carbon fiber tripod, and minimal supplies, prioritizing equipment over safety gear. He had also clipped a small action camera to the tripod for time-lapse recording. His reputation for rule-bending was well established. He had once climbed a restricted cliff face near Pachmarhi and had been escorted out of a wildlife reserve in Chhattisgarh for crossing barriers. His friends followed reluctantly that morning, trusting his confidence even as they expressed concerns about straying from the designated paths. The forest was a cathedral of teak and sal trees, their massive trunks rising into a canopy that blocked most sunlight, leaving the undergrowth dim and damp. Sloth bears inhabit these central Indian forests, which are highly territorial omnivores. Unlike their more predictable cousins, sloth bears are known for extremely aggressive behavior when surprised. Sloth bears have a powerful sense of smell, but relatively poor eyesight and hearing, so surprise encounters are common unless people make noise. The group passed 3 clearly posted warning signs within the first hour, each showing bears and advising visitors to stay on trails, travel in groups, and make noise. A ranger at the entrance had warned of increased bear activity in the northern sections, but friends said Devraj wanted the untouched wilderness aesthetic. Crossing a shallow stream, Devraj spotted a canopy opening and dropped to one knee to adjust his tripod, while Nikhil and Arjun lingered by bamboo. Fresh claw marks and disturbed earth suggested recent bear activity, but Devraj focused on his viewfinder. Arjun pointed out paw prints in the mud, but Devraj waved him off. They had no bear spray, air horns, or other deterrents, and had been silent, leaving a bear easily surprised. The sloth bear emerged from behind a dense thicket of shrubs less than 15 feet away, moving with shocking speed for its bulky frame. Devraj was rising from his crouch when the animal charged, covering the distance in seconds. The first strike came from its right paw, claws extended, tearing across Devraj's stomach and shredding both his shirt and the skin beneath. He screamed, a high-pitched sound that echoed through the trees as he instinctively turned away, which only exposed his back to the second swipe. The bear's jaws clamped onto the side of Devraj's face, crushing his cheekbone with audible force. Blood sprayed in an arc that splattered across his fallen camera, which had tumbled from the tripod during his initial stumble. Nikhil rushed forward with his aluminum trekking pole, striking the bear's shoulder, but the animal barely acknowledged the blow. Instead, it shook Devraj violently, the way a dog might shake a toy, his body ragdolling as more tissue tore. Arjun screamed for help, his voice cracking with panic. The bear released Devraj's face only to slash at his abdomen again, its claws opening deep furrows that exposed underlying muscle. Devraj's screams had become wet, gurgling sounds. His hands came up weakly to protect his face, but the bear bit down on his left forearm, snapping bone. The animal's huffing breaths were interspersed with guttural sounds that seemed almost mechanical. Nikhil and Arjun, both now backing away in terror, watched as the bear lifted Devraj partially off the ground by his shoulders, then slammed him against a thick tree trunk. The impact was sickeningly loud. The bear continued its assault for what witnesses later estimated as 3 to 4 minutes, though both men admitted time became impossible to track. Devraj had stopped moving after approximately 90 seconds, but the bear continued, driven by territorial aggression rather than predatory hunger. Finally, the bear retreated into the undergrowth, dragging portions of Devraj's torn clothing with it. The forest returned to silence, except for Arjun's hyperventilating and the drip of blood from leaves overhead. One of Devraj's small action cameras had continued recording from the tripod. The memory card preserved several smeared frames and a portion of audio. Nikhil used his mobile phone to call park authorities. The nearest ranger post was a remote outstation. With mobile signal dropping, the first call took several attempts before reaching the gate. Rangers arrived 33 minutes later, finding Devraj's body partially concealed beneath ferns, approximately 12 feet from where the attack had begun. The preliminary field report noted massive trauma to the face, throat, chest, and abdomen, with the probable cause of death being hemorrhagic shock. Park officials recovered the camera equipment, including the blood-smeared footage, before returning them to his family. They received his remains 4 days later, following a formal autopsy in Jabalpur that confirmed the field findings. Nikhil and Arjun both required extended psychological counseling. Neither returned to recreational hiking. It was August 7, 2016. when the remote wetlands of Kakadu National Park became the scene of a deadly encounter. Located in Australia's Northern Territory, this UNESCO World Heritage Site spans nearly 20,000 square kilometers of pristine wilderness, where ancient Aboriginal rock art overlooks waterways that have remained unchanged for millennia. The Adelaide River winds through this untouched landscape, its muddy banks concealing some of the world's largest saltwater crocodiles. During the dry season, these waterways become concentrated hunting grounds where protective females fiercely guard their nesting sites. Spencer Vaughn, a 34-year-old former zoo employee, had fallen from grace after losing his legitimate wildlife career due to misconduct allegations. Desperate for money and familiar with reptile behavior, he had turned to the lucrative black market trade in exotic animal products. Crocodile eggs commanded premium prices from private collectors and illegal breeding operations, making them an irresistible target for someone with Spencer's knowledge and financial desperation. His reluctant business partner, Tommy Nakamura, had warned against the Kakadu expedition, knowing the area's reputation for massive protective female crocodiles. Elder Mary Tungara, a local Aboriginal ranger, had recently noticed suspicious vehicle tracks near sacred nesting sites. Spencer's GPS coordinates led him to a known nesting area where female crocodiles had constructed their mud mounds weeks earlier. Saltwater crocodiles are apex predators that have survived virtually unchanged for over 200 million years. Adult females protecting their nests can exceed 16 feet in length and weigh over 1,000 pounds, possessing the most powerful bite force in the animal kingdom at over 3,700 pounds per square inch. These ambush hunters are perfectly adapted for stealth, capable of remaining motionless for hours while monitoring their territory. During nesting season, female crocodiles become extremely aggressive, patrolling their nesting areas and attacking any perceived threats to their eggs. Their hunting strategy relies on explosive bursts of speed from concealed positions, using their massive tails for propulsion through water. Once they secure prey, the signature death roll disorients victims while drowning them in the murky depths. Spencer waded into the shallow water under the cover of darkness, his headlamp cutting through the humid night air as he approached the muddy nesting bank. The water reached his waist as he moved slowly through the Adelaide River, a waterproof bag slung across his shoulder for the valuable cargo. Unknown to the poacher, he had entered the territory of Magna, a 16-foot female saltwater crocodile that had been guarding her nest for weeks. The protective mother detected Spencer's presence immediately through water vibrations and foreign scent, submerging silently and approaching from downstream with practiced stealth. Spencer knelt in the shallow water, his hands working quickly to excavate buried eggs from the first nest he located. His headlamp illuminated the white, leathery shells as he carefully placed them in his waterproof bag, focused entirely on the valuable prize. Magna positioned herself just 10 feet away, her eyes and nostrils barely breaking the surface as she assessed the intruder. As Spencer reached for another clutch of eggs, the maternal guardian exploded from the water with tremendous force. Magna's massive jaws clamped down on Spencer's torso with bone-crushing power, the initial bite penetrating his ribcage and puncturing vital organs. The impact drove Spencer backward as his headlamp flew into the darkness, plunging the scene into complete blackness. The death roll began instantly, Magna spinning Spencer's body violently as she dragged him into deeper water. The rotational force snapped Spencer's spine in multiple places while the crocodile's grip crushed his sternum and collapsed both lungs. Blood filled Spencer's airways as broken ribs punctured his heart and liver. The powerful tail thrashed as Magna continued the death roll, breaking Spencer's pelvis and femur bones. Within 30 seconds, Spencer had succumbed to massive internal bleeding, drowning, and catastrophic spinal injuries. Magna then performed her instinctive behavior, wedging the body beneath a submerged log where it would decompose before consumption. Tommy Nakamura reported Spencer missing after he failed to return to their campsite by dawn. A search operation was launched by Northern Territory Police, but the remote location and crocodile-infested waters made recovery efforts extremely dangerous. Elder Mary Tungara's investigation revealed tire tracks and equipment fragments near the nesting site, confirming illegal poaching activity. The incident highlighted the ongoing problem of wildlife trafficking in protected areas, with authorities vowing increased patrols during nesting season. Spencer's estranged family expressed shock at his illegal activities, stating they had lost contact with him months earlier. Conservation groups used the tragedy to raise awareness about the devastating impact of wildlife trafficking on endangered species populations. The case remained officially unsolved, with Spencer's body never recovered from the ancient waterways he had tried to exploit. It was October 11, 2013, in a remote section of a provincial park in northwestern Ontario, roughly 90 miles from the nearest town. The campsite sat in a clearing surrounded by dense boreal forest, black spruce, jack pine, and thick underbrush. Mark Whitfield was 38 years old, a software engineer from Toronto who enjoyed backcountry camping. He was moderately experienced but not an expert outdoorsman. He preferred solitude and often camped alone. He had driven up for a long weekend, planning 3 nights at a backcountry site accessible only by a 2-mile hike from the nearest access road. He was the only person camped in this section of the park. The season was winding down, and few people ventured out this late in the year. Mark understood basic bear precautions: store food in a bear canister, keep a clean campsite, avoid cooking near the tent. He carried bear spray and kept it in his tent at night. At the park office, a ranger warned that bear activity was higher than usual due to a poor berry crop, and advised against camping alone. Mark proceeded anyway. On his hike in, he passed a tree with fresh claw marks about chest high. That evening, he heard rustling in the brush about 50 feet away, but the sound did not repeat. He cooked a simple meal, cleaned his dishes at a stream, and stored all food and scented items in a bear canister placed about 100 feet from his tent, downwind. By 8 p.m., he was in his tent, reading by headlamp. Around 9:15 p.m., a low huffing noise followed by the crack of a branch brought him upright. He grabbed his bear spray and unzipped the tent flap slightly. He saw nothing but darkness. He waited several minutes, then zipped the tent closed and lay back down, his hand still on the canister. The black bear is the most common bear species in North America, with adult males typically weighing between 200 and 600 pounds. They are generally shy and avoid humans, but are opportunistic feeders that will investigate campsites. Predatory attacks are extremely rare, fewer than 1 fatal attack per year across North America, but they do occur, carried out almost exclusively by adult males in remote areas. Unlike defensive attacks, predatory attacks involve a bear actively hunting a human as prey. The bear approaches silently, without bluff charges or vocalizations. Their bite force is around 800 pounds per square inch, and their claws can reach 2 to 4 inches in length. The bear had been moving through the area around the campsite for at least 20 minutes, a male approximately 280 pounds. It approached the tent from the side, moving low and deliberate, without making a sound. It pressed its nose against the fabric, then bit down on a corner near the entrance. The fabric tore with a sharp ripping sound. Mark jolted awake. He had been dozing and grabbed for his bear spray. He discharged it toward the opening, but the confined space and his disoriented position meant most of it dispersed without effect. The bear paused briefly, then pushed forward again. It lunged forward, front paws tearing through the fabric. Both paws raked across Mark's chest and torso, the claws opening deep lacerations across his skin. He screamed and tried to scramble backward, but his sleeping bag restricted his movement. The bear bit down on his left shoulder, crushing through muscle and bone. Mark pushed at the animal's face with both hands, but the bear shook its head violently, tearing the wound wider. It released, then bit down immediately on the left side of his head and upper neck. One canine penetrated the temporal bone, another drove through the soft tissue near the base of the skull, fracturing the temporal bone and causing severe trauma to the underlying brain. Mark's body went rigid briefly. Then his movements became weak and uncoordinated. The bear shook him twice in hard, wrenching jerks before dragging him out through the torn tent opening. It bit down again on his neck and shoulder and shook him a third time, causing further damage to the cervical spine and neck vessels. Mark's arms dropped. The bear dragged him approximately 35 feet into a dense thicket of spruce and underbrush and began feeding roughly 20 minutes later. Mark's body was found 4 days later by a park ranger on a routine check. The tent was shredded, the bear canister undisturbed and unopened. The body showed deep claw lacerations across the chest and torso, a crushed left shoulder, and extensive bite wounds to the head and neck. The cause of death was traumatic brain injury combined with massive hemorrhage from damage to the carotid artery and jugular vein. Mark likely lost consciousness within 30 to 60 seconds and died within several minutes. A trail camera Mark had set up near his tent captured the bear approaching and the initial moments of the attack before it moved out of frame. Ontario authorities retained it as evidence in an open inquest examining park warning protocols, preventing its public release. His body was found 4 days later by a park ranger, cause of death confirmed as traumatic brain injury and massive hemorrhage. The bear was located 3/4 of a mile away and euthanized on site after DNA matched Mark's remains. It was March 8, 2016, and the evening feeding routine at Sunshine Roadside Zoo in rural Florida proceeded according to the facility's basic schedule as Maria Santos prepared the lion's dinner. The 28-year-old animal caretaker moved through the big cat area with practiced efficiency, her every movement monitored by the basic security camera system that recorded activities within the facility for insurance purposes. Maria had been working with big cats for 5 years, developing expertise in animal behavior and husbandry that had made her one of the facility's most trusted employees. She had started as a volunteer while studying animal science in college before being hired full-time to work specifically with the Roadside Zoo's collection of African lions, tigers, and leopards. Maria was known for her confidence around dangerous animals and her ability to read their behavioral cues. The facility housed 12 big cats in a series of basic enclosures designed to provide minimal safety for staff and basic housing for the animals. Each enclosure featured simple safety barriers, including service areas where staff could prepare food and perform maintenance with limited protection from the animals. Maria was responsible for feeding the facility's pride of African lions, which included a 350-pound male named Simba and 2 adult females. The lions had been acquired from a failed roadside zoo and had lived at the facility for 3 years, developing routines and relationships with their caretakers. African lions are apex predators that have evolved as cooperative hunters, with males weighing up to 420 pounds and possessing incredible strength and speed. They are highly intelligent animals with complex social structures, but they retain all their natural hunting instincts, even in captivity. Lions are particularly dangerous during feeding time, as their predatory responses are heightened and they may view any intrusion as a threat to their food source. Their powerful jaws can deliver a bite force exceeding 650 pounds per square inch, while their razor-sharp claws can inflict devastating wounds. Maria had been preparing the lions' evening meal in the service area adjacent to their main enclosure when she accidentally dropped a food bucket into the lions' territory. The bucket contained raw meat that represented a significant portion of the cat's daily nutrition, and Maria knew she needed to retrieve it to maintain their feeding schedule. The security cameras captured Maria's fatal decision to enter the lockout zone to retrieve the dropped bucket. What she didn't realize was that the shift door between the service area and the main enclosure had been left unlocked earlier that day during routine cleaning operations. The oversight created a potential pathway between Maria and the hungry lions. Maria bent down to pick up the food bucket, her back turned to the unlocked shift door. The security footage shows Simba, the massive male lion, pushing through the unlocked door and entering the lockout zone behind Maria as she focused on retrieving the scattered meat. The lion moved with the silent stealth that made his species such effective hunters, approaching to within striking distance before Maria became aware of his presence. Maria turned around to face Simba just as the 350-pound predator launched his attack. The lion's massive paws struck Maria in the chest and shoulders, driving her to the ground with bone-crushing force. Simba's claws raked across Maria's torso, opening deep gashes that immediately began bleeding profusely as his jaws sought purchase on her neck and throat. The security cameras recorded Maria's desperate struggles as Simba's powerful jaws clamped down on her throat in the classic lion-killing bite. The lion's natural hunting instincts drove him to maintain his suffocating grip, using his massive weight to pin Maria to the ground while his jaws worked to crush her airway. Maria struggled briefly before her movements rapidly weakened, her movements gradually weakening as asphyxiation and blood loss overwhelmed her system. Other staff members were alerted by the commotion and arrived within several minutes, immediately attempting to divert Simba's attention using makeshift tools and shouting. However, their intervention came too late, as Maria had already succumbed to suffocation and massive trauma from the lion's crushing bite and sustained attack. Maria died from asphyxiation and massive trauma to her neck and torso, her injuries consistent with a lion's killing bite. The investigation revealed that the unlocked shift door had created the dangerous situation that led to Maria's death. The facility's minimal safety protocols had been violated when staff failed to secure the door after completing cleaning operations. The incident resulted in immediate OSHA violations and multiple civil lawsuits that eventually forced the facility's closure. Maria's death led to enhanced safety requirements for roadside zoos and became a case study in training programs for exotic animal facility workers. The security footage became evidence in civil proceedings that highlighted the inadequate safety measures at non-accredited facilities. It was August 11, 2017, when the near-shore reef waters off Umkomaas, South Africa, became the site of a deadly encounter. The coastal area was experiencing the aftermath of heavy runoff from recent storms, creating murky conditions that reduced underwater visibility to less than 5 feet. The churning waters carried sediment and debris from inland rivers, transforming the normally clear diving environment into a challenging and dangerous setting. The reef system near Umkomaas was known for its diverse marine life, but the recent weather patterns had disrupted normal feeding behaviors and migration routes. Local dive operators had reported increased shark activity in the area, with several species moving closer to shore following baitfish populations displaced by the storms. Roscoe Vulp, a 28-year-old dive tourism videographer, specialized in capturing close-range footage of marine wildlife for documentary productions. Known for his willingness to film in challenging conditions that other divers avoided, Vulp had built a reputation for obtaining dramatic underwater footage. He had arrived at Umkomaas specifically to document how the recent environmental changes were affecting local shark populations. Vulp was part of a small dive group that morning, each equipped with helmet-mounted cameras to record their underwater experience. The group had been briefed about the reduced visibility conditions, but decided to proceed with the dive despite the challenging circumstances. Recent reports of bull shark migration activity in the area had attracted Vulp's professional interest. As the dive progressed, Vulp gradually separated from the main group, drawn by what appeared to be interesting marine activity in a slightly deeper section of the reef. His helmet camera continued recording as he descended several yards below his companions, who remained closer to the surface in better visibility conditions. Bull sharks are among the ocean's most formidable and unpredictable predators, capable of thriving in both saltwater and freshwater environments. These powerful animals can reach lengths of 11 feet and weights exceeding 500 pounds, with bite forces that rank among the strongest of all shark species. Their broad, muscular build and aggressive temperament make them particularly dangerous to humans. Unlike many shark species that prefer deeper waters, bull sharks frequently hunt in shallow, murky environments where their prey has limited visibility and escape options. They are opportunistic feeders with an extremely varied diet, and their highly assertive nature makes them more likely to investigate perceived prey when encountering unfamiliar movements in their hunting grounds. Bull sharks possess exceptional sensory capabilities, including the ability to detect electrical fields generated by living creatures and minute vibrations in the water. Their hunting strategy often involves approaching from below or behind, using surprise to overwhelm their prey before it can react. Volpe made a critical error by separating from his dive group in conditions of severely limited visibility. The murky water that had attracted him for filming purposes also provided perfect cover for predatory ambush attacks. His isolated position made him vulnerable to predators that might avoid larger groups of divers. The bull shark approached from below, using the poor visibility and Volpe's downward focus to remain undetected until the moment of attack. The initial strike targeted his lower torso with devastating force, the shark's powerful jaws clamping down and causing immediate massive trauma. The bite inflicted catastrophic injuries to soft tissue, muscles, and internal organs, with major blood vessels torn in the process. The impact caused Volpe to lose buoyancy control and orientation underwater. The expanding cloud of blood signaled significant trauma. Whether driven by continued feeding behavior or biological response to blood in the water, the shark pressed the attack, rather than releasing and retreating as these predators sometimes do. The second bite struck the upper leg and pelvic region, compounding the already severe injuries. The trauma resulted in rapid and uncontrolled blood loss, as multiple vessels were compromised. The combination of shock, blood loss, and physical damage rapidly undermined Volpe's ability to maintain control of his breathing apparatus. As consciousness faded, seawater began entering his respiratory system. The catastrophic injuries, combined with loss of airway control and continued blood loss, led to death within minutes. Volpe's body sank toward the reef floor as the shark moved away. His helmet camera continued recording until the housing eventually flooded. The other divers discovered Volpe's body during an immediate search operation after realizing he had become separated from the group. Emergency response teams recovered the body and the damaged camera equipment, which provided crucial evidence about the attack sequence. The incident prompted a comprehensive investigation by authorities, leading to temporary diving restrictions in the Umkomaas area during periods of poor visibility. Local dive operators implemented enhanced safety protocols, requiring closer group supervision and improved communication systems. Volpe's family established a foundation promoting diving safety education, emphasizing the importance of maintaining group cohesion during challenging underwater conditions. It was October 9th, 2014, and the afternoon light cast long shadows across the Fred Meyer parking lot in Anchorage, Alaska. A crowd was forming near the cart return area, witnessing the animal that locals knew to fear during rutting season. Helga Soren, 52, had lived in Anchorage for 23 years, having moved from Minnesota shortly after her divorce. She had 2 adult daughters living in Seattle and a small circle of friends from her church group. Her Facebook account showed frequent posts about Alaskan wildlife, mostly photographs taken from safe distances or through car windows. Her supervisor later told investigators that Helga had requested to leave work an hour early that day to run errands before an evening church meeting. Her routine typically included grocery shopping on Thursdays, a pattern she had maintained for years. Alaskan moose are the largest members of the deer family in North America, with adult bulls standing over 6 feet tall at the shoulder and weighing between 1,200 and 1,600 pounds. Their front legs, equipped with incredibly powerful muscles, can deliver enormous blunt force, enough to cause catastrophic internal injuries. During fall rutting season, bulls experience dramatic hormonal changes that increase aggression levels significantly, making them particularly dangerous to humans. By the time Helga arrived, about 15 people were scattered around the parking lot, mostly near vehicles or the store entrance. The bull moose stood between a white pickup and a silver sedan, lowering its head to sniff the pavement. Although guidelines recommend staying at least 50 feet away, Helga positioned herself about 20 feet off, phone raised to chest height, recording. A man loading lumber gestured for her to move back. She glanced briefly but continued forward. The moose, already showing clear agitation, flattened its ears against its skull. Helga adjusted her position again, moving slightly to her right. The bull's head remained low, his eyes fixed on her as she moved. Then, with no additional warning, the moose lunged forward and launched a devastating front leg kick, his right hoof driving forward like a battering ram. The kick struck Helga in the left side of her torso, just below her rib cage, and continued through to her left hip. The force violently knocked her backward, partially lifting her off balance, sending her crashing down onto the pavement a short distance away. A dashcam in a vehicle parked 3 spaces away captured the strike from a side angle, corroborating witness reports and showing her body crumpling against the pavement. As she lay on the ground, the moose stepped forward and delivered a couple of downward stomps with its front hooves to her torso and lower body before stepping back. She remained motionless. The moose stepped backward but did not leave the immediate area, instead moving laterally between parked cars while continuing to display agitation. Several bystanders moved toward Helga, but stopped when the moose turned in their direction, his proximity making any rescue attempt immediately dangerous. Witnesses later described seeing her left leg move slightly and hearing labored breathing sounds, but her eyes remained closed, and she made no attempt to stand or call for help. When the moose finally wandered toward the far end of the parking lot, 2 men approached Helga, one of them a physician's assistant who happened to be shopping. He immediately noted her deteriorated condition. He instructed bystanders not to move her and to keep watch for the moose's return. Multiple witnesses called 911 within seconds of the initial strike. Fire department paramedics arrived 7 minutes later. Finding Helga unconscious but still breathing, they immobilized her spine before transport and departed for the hospital. The moose had by then moved into the wooded area behind the shopping center and was no longer visible. Helga died in the emergency department at 4:31 p.m., 44 minutes after the attack. Emergency clinicians performed rapid imaging and initiated emergency interventions, but the internal damage and catastrophic blood loss were not survivable. The attending physician documented that her internal bleeding resulted from multiple high-force impacts, including the initial kick, ground impact, and subsequent stomping. Officials investigated the incident, monitored the moose, issued public safety guidance, and seized existing footage of the incident. Helga's daughters released a brief statement through the hospital requesting privacy. It was October 19, 2014, in the fog-choked forests of the Kamchatka Peninsula. The morning had begun with confidence and careless bravado, but it would end with torn flesh scattered beneath the birch trees. Mikhail Rodin was a 38-year-old logging worker from Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky with a reputation for stubborn self-reliance. He worked 6-day weeks operating heavy machinery in the timber camps along the peninsula's eastern slopes, and his weekends were devoted to hunting trips he claimed kept his survival instincts sharp. His cousin, Anatoly, 35, often accompanied him on these excursions. Mikhail frequently boasted to co-workers that he knew the forest better than any ranger and had once tracked an injured elk for 2 days straight without proper supplies. Neither man held formal hunting licenses, and their firearms reflected this lack of official oversight. Mikhail carried a battered rifle prone to occasional misfires, its sights misaligned from years of rough handling. The weapon had limited effective range and required careful maintenance it rarely received. They had driven 3 hours from the city that morning, parking their truck near an unmarked trail Mikhail insisted would lead them to prime deer territory. Anatoly wore a helmet-mounted camera, originally purchased to review their tracking techniques and document any successful kills. The Kamchatka Peninsula, in mid-October, is a landscape caught between seasons, where autumn rain mixes with the first snows and visibility drops to dangerous levels. Brown bears on the peninsula are among the largest subspecies in the world, with adult males weighing up to 1,300 pounds and standing over 8 feet tall when upright. Females with cubs display heightened aggression, particularly during autumn, when they prepare for winter denning. These bears can run at speeds exceeding 30 miles per hour over short distances, despite their massive size, and their claws, curved weapons up to 4 inches long, are designed to tear through flesh and break bones with minimal effort. A brown bear's bite is powerful enough to crush bone and break large bones, and maternal instinct often causes defensive attacks with little or only brief warning. The morning passed in relative silence, as the two men tracked deer prints through increasingly dense brush. By early afternoon, fog had reduced visibility to less than 30 yards. The forest floor was carpeted with wet leaves and patches of early snow, muffling their footsteps, but also concealing animal tracks until they were nearly on top of them. Mikhail spotted movement near a cluster of birch trees and raised his rifle. He fired without proper aim, the crack of the gunshot echoing unnaturally loud through the fog-dampened air. What Mikhail had not seen were the 2 brown bear cubs foraging behind those birch trees, their small forms concealed by low-hanging branches. The gunshot spooked the cubs, sending them scrambling up the nearest trunk with panicked squeals. Their mother, a massive female weighing an estimated 650 pounds, materialized from the fog with terrifying speed. Anatoly, positioned several yards behind his cousin, saw the bear's dark shape emerge and opened his mouth to shout a warning. But the animal closed the distance in seconds. The bear hit Mikhail from the side, her initial impact lifting him completely off his feet and slamming him into the trunk of a thick pine tree. The helmet camera on Anatoly captured the moment clearly. Mikhail's rifle flying from his grip, his body crumpling against the bark, and then the bear's claws tearing through his jacket and the flesh beneath. The first swipes opened deep gashes across his chest and left arm, fabric, and skin separating in ragged lines that immediately began pumping blood. Mikhail screamed, a sound Anatoly would later describe to investigators as barely human, more like an animal caught in machinery. The bear pinned Mikhail against the tree with her full weight, her jaws closing around his right shoulder. His ribcage collapsed under the pressure, punctured ribs driving into internal organs. Blood sprayed across the bark and soaked into the forest floor. Anatoly fired a single shot as a last-ditch deterrent. The bear barely reacted. Defensive attacks often don't respond to warning shots. Instead, she used one massive paw to swipe at Mikhail's face and neck, her claws raking through tissue and severing major blood vessels. The bear grabbed Mikhail's torso and dragged him 6 feet before releasing him to bite and claw further, puncturing his abdomen and ripping his thigh to the femur. The attack lasted about 2 minutes before she retreated into the fog. Apparently satisfied her cubs were safe, Anatoly approached his cousin. Unresponsive, chest still, blood pooled beneath him. Seeing first aid was futile, he began a 2-hour fog-slowed hike back to their truck, getting delayed by dense undergrowth. After reaching the vehicle, he drove an hour on rough roads to a village with phone service around 4:30 p.m. He contacted local authorities, who dispatched a recovery team. They reached the site just before full darkness. They found Mikhail's body where Anatoly had described, already beginning to stiffen in the cold. The forensic examination conducted at the village morgue documented the cause of death as exsanguination and traumatic shock, secondary to bear attack. The incident received minimal media coverage beyond a brief mention in a regional hunting safety bulletin. Local authorities reinforced existing regulations requiring proper licensing and bear safety protocols, though enforcement remained sporadic in remote areas. Anatoly turned over his helmet camera footage to investigators, but requested it not be made public, but clips of it seemed to have leaked. It was November 22, 2014, when the Tarcoles River in Costa Rica became the site of a tragic scientific expedition. Located on the Pacific coast near the Carrara National Park, this river system is renowned for having one of the highest concentrations of American crocodiles in Central America. The dry season had dramatically reduced water levels, transforming the normally expansive waterway into a series of concentrated pools that created ideal hunting territories for the region's apex predators. The surrounding tropical dry forest echoed with the calls of scarlet macaws and howler monkeys, while the muddy riverbanks revealed countless crocodile tracks from the previous night's hunting activities. Miranda Keegan, a 29-year-old marine biologist from the University of Costa Rica, had dedicated her doctoral research to understanding American crocodile behavior patterns during drought conditions. Known for her fearless approach to fieldwork, she had been documenting territorial responses and feeding behaviors for 6 months. Her mentor, Dr. Carlos Mendoza, had repeatedly warned her about working alone near the water during peak territorial periods, but Miranda's passion for her research often overrode safety protocols. Paulo Silva, her experienced local guide, understood the dangers of the Tarcoles River, but had grown accustomed to Miranda's determined independence. The research station had received funding to study how climate change and seasonal droughts affected crocodile populations, making this dry season particularly valuable for data collection. American crocodiles are formidable predators, with typical large males reaching lengths of 11 to 15 feet and weighing over 1,000 pounds. Unlike their more aggressive alligator cousins, these crocodiles are typically more reclusive, but territorial males become extremely dangerous when defending prime hunting grounds. Their powerful jaws can exert bite forces exceeding 3,000 pounds per square inch, while their muscular tails serve as both propulsion systems and devastating weapons. During drought conditions, concentrated prey populations create highly valuable territories that males will defend aggressively against any perceived threats. The death roll, their signature killing technique, involves spinning their prey underwater to disorient and drown victims, while breaking bones through tremendous rotational force. Miranda approached the research site at dawn, her sampling equipment organized methodically as she prepared for another day of behavioral observations. The river section had shrunk to roughly half its normal width, creating concentrated fish and bird populations that attracted the area's dominant predator. El Jefe, a massive 14-foot American crocodile, had claimed this territory and patrolled it aggressively for weeks. Paulo was 50 meters away, setting up camera equipment, when Miranda began her approach to the water's edge, extending her sampling pole toward the remaining deep water. As Miranda leaned forward to collect her water sample, the saturated mud beneath her knees suddenly gave way. She slid down the steep bank, her equipment scattering as she splashed into the shallow water just 15 feet from the concealed predator. El Jefe had been monitoring the area from a submerged position, his body perfectly camouflaged among floating debris and vegetation. The sudden intrusion triggered an immediate territorial response from the massive crocodile. El Jefe lunged forward with explosive speed, his powerful jaws clamping down on Miranda's left thigh with bone-crushing force. The initial bite severed her femoral artery and shattered her femur bone, sending blood streaming into the muddy water. Her scream alerted Paulo, who immediately began running toward the riverbank. The crocodile's death roll began instantly, spinning Miranda's body violently as she fought desperately to reach the shore. The rotational force broke her pelvis and dislocated her hip joint, while the crocodile's grip tore through muscle and tissue. The churning water turned crimson as El Jefe maintained his hold, performing another death roll that snapped Miranda's lower spine and caused massive internal bleeding. Her struggles weakened rapidly as blood loss and shock took their toll. The attack lasted only 40 seconds, but the crocodile's powerful bite and death roll had inflicted fatal injuries. Paulo reached the shore and threw rocks at El Jefe, but the territorial predator maintained his grip until Miranda stopped moving, her body held firmly in his jaws as she drowned in the bloodied water. Costa Rican authorities launched an immediate investigation into the research station's safety protocols, questioning why Miranda had been allowed to work so close to known crocodile habitat without proper safety equipment. The University of Costa Rica suspended all fieldwork pending a comprehensive review of research procedures. Environmental groups used the tragedy to highlight the increasing dangers faced by scientists studying wildlife in their natural habitats as climate change intensifies territorial behaviors. Miranda's family described her as a passionate conservationist who had dedicated her life to protecting the species that ultimately claimed her. The incident prompted new safety requirements for researchers working near crocodile habitats throughout Central America. It was September 22, 2014, in the Angeles National Forest, roughly 18 miles northeast of Los Angeles, California. The trail cut through dense chaparral and oak woodland, winding uphill along a ridgeline. The terrain was steep and rocky, with loose dirt and scattered boulders. Claire Farrell was 29 years old, a high school teacher from Pasadena who ran trails several times a week. She was experienced, fit, and familiar with the area, having run this particular loop at least a dozen times over the past year. She carried a small hydration pack, her phone, and a canister of pepper spray clipped to her waistband. A notice posted at the trailhead reported recent mountain lion sightings, dated 2 weeks prior, with tracks found near a creek crossing about 3 miles up the trail. She signed the register box and started up the trail shortly after 2 p.m. About 40 minutes into her run, she passed a deer carcass roughly 15 feet off the trail, partially covered with leaves and dirt. She slowed briefly to look at it, then kept running. The carcass was less than 2 days old and had been dragged into the brush and cached, behavior typical of mountain lions, which return to feed on kills over several days. Behind her, roughly 80 feet back, a large tawny shape moved through the brush parallel to the trail, keeping low and silent. The mountain lion, also called a cougar or puma, is the largest wildcat in North America. Adult males weigh between 115 and 220 pounds, females between 64 and 140 pounds. They are ambush predators capable of sprinting up to 50 miles per hour in short bursts. Attacks on humans are rare, approximately 27 fatal attacks recorded in North America since 1890, but occur most often when a lion is injured, starving, or in the vicinity of a cached kill. The attack is focused on the neck or head, the lion using its weight to knock prey down before delivering a killing bite to the base of the skull or cervical vertebrae. Claire was approximately 4.2 miles into her run, moving uphill on a narrow section of trail bordered by dense brush on both sides, about 3 feet wide, with a steep drop-off to the left and a wall of manzanita to the right. The mountain lion had been following her for nearly 10 minutes, staying 60 to 80 feet behind and slightly uphill. When Claire reached a sharp switchback and turned her back to climb the next section, the lion accelerated. It closed the distance in seconds, moving low and fast, its paws silent on the dirt. The lion covered the final 30 feet in under 3 seconds. Claire did not hear it. She was mid-stride when the animal leapt from about 8 feet behind her, its front paws striking her upper back with enough force to knock her forward. She hit the ground hard. Before she could push herself up, the lion's claws raked down her back, tearing through her shirt and into the skin beneath. She twisted onto her side, and the lion bit down on her right forearm, puncturing through to the bone. Claire pulled her arm back and struck at the animal's face with her other hand. The lion released the arm and lunged for her neck. Its jaws closed around the back of her neck, canines penetrating deep into the muscle and soft tissue at the base of her skull. Claire's free hand clawed at the animal's muzzle, but the lion drove its teeth deeper and applied more pressure, its full weight pinning her down. The lion's grip compressed her airway and the vessels along the side of her neck simultaneously. Claire's movements slowed, then weakened. Her hand dropped to the dirt. Within 2 to 3 minutes, she lost consciousness. The lion held the bite throughout, maintaining pressure until she stopped moving entirely. Claire lay face down on the trail, motionless. Blood seeped from the puncture wounds on her neck, the lacerations across her back, and the bite wound on her forearm. The lion dragged her approximately 20 feet into the manzanita, covered her loosely with debris, and remained nearby before beginning to feed. Her body was found the following afternoon by 2 hikers who noticed vultures circling and followed drag marks leading off the trail. Authorities reached the site within 2 hours. The body had been partially cached, covered with leaves, dirt, and small branches. The cause of death was asphyxiation due to compression of the airway and cervical vasculature, with significant soft tissue and muscle damage to the neck, back, and right forearm. Wildlife officers located the lion the next day within a half-mile of the attack site. It was a young adult female, approximately 3 years old, and weighing 128 pounds, noticeably underweight for her age. She had an old, improperly healed fibula fracture in her left hind leg that caused a visible limp and would have significantly impaired her ability to hunt deer. DNA from her claws and mouth matched Claire's. She was euthanized on site. A mountain biker roughly a quarter mile behind Claire had a helmet camera running and captured the final moments of the attack before retreating to call 911. He surrendered the footage to wildlife investigators, who sealed it permanently, citing its graphic nature. Her body was found the following afternoon, partially cached off the trail. Cause of death was asphyxiation, with the lion euthanized on site after DNA confirmed the match. It was August 22, 2014, and the pristine wilderness of Glacier National Park stretched endlessly under the Montana sky as David Park and his girlfriend Lisa set up their campsite in a remote backcountry location. The 35-year-old amateur nature enthusiast had positioned a trail camera near their tent to capture wildlife footage, hoping to document their wilderness experience and the magnificent animals that called this rugged landscape home. David worked as a software engineer in Seattle, but spent his free time pursuing outdoor adventures throughout the Pacific Northwest. He had limited experience with true wilderness camping and had underestimated the dangers present in grizzly bear country, despite receiving comprehensive safety briefings from park rangers. David's enthusiasm for wildlife photography had led him to take risks that more experienced outdoorsmen would have avoided. The couple had hiked 8 miles into the backcountry to reach their designated campsite, carrying all their food and equipment in backpacks designed for extended wilderness travel. Park regulations required all food to be stored in bear-proof containers provided at each campsite, but David had decided to keep some snacks and toiletries in their tent for convenience during the night. The remote location offered spectacular views of glaciated peaks and pristine alpine meadows, but it also provided ideal habitat for one of North America's most dangerous predators. Grizzly bears were common throughout this section of the park, and campers were required to follow strict food storage protocols to prevent dangerous encounters with these powerful animals. Grizzly bears are among North America's largest and most powerful predators, with adult males weighing up to 800 pounds and possessing incredible strength and speed. They have an excellent sense of smell that can detect food odors from several hundred meters away, and they will aggressively investigate any potential food sources in their territory. Grizzlies are omnivores that require massive amounts of calories to survive, especially during the fall months when they are preparing for winter hibernation. They are highly intelligent animals with excellent memories, and they can become food conditioned if they successfully obtain human food, making them extremely dangerous to future campers. David's trail camera had been recording throughout the night when a massive 600-pound grizzly bear approached their campsite at dawn, attracted by the food odors emanating from their tent. The bear had detected the improperly stored food from approximately 400 meters away and had followed the scent trail directly to their location. The trail camera captured the bear's initial investigation of their campsite as it used its powerful nose to locate the source of the food odors. The grizzly began tearing at their tent fabric with its massive claws, trying to reach the food stored inside. David and Lisa were awakened by the sounds of the bear's investigation, finding themselves trapped inside their tent with a massive predator just inches away. David made the fatal decision to confront the grizzly bear instead of following the park's recommended protocols for bear encounters. The trail camera recorded him emerging from the tent and attempting to scare away the 600-pound predator by yelling and throwing objects. His aggressive behavior triggered the bear's defensive instincts, transforming a food-seeking encounter into a life-threatening attack. The grizzly bear charged David with explosive speed, covering the distance between them in seconds. The trail camera captured the initial moments of the charge before the bear and David moved beyond its limited field of view. The massive predator's paws struck David in the chest and shoulders, driving him to the ground with bone-crushing force. The bear's claws, each measuring up to 4 inches in length, raked across David's torso and limbs, opening deep gashes that caused massive blood loss. The grizzly bear delivered several powerful defensive swipes and bites to David's torso and limbs, causing massive trauma before disengaging from what it no longer perceived as a threat. The bear's defensive mauling lasted approximately 30 seconds before David's movements ceased, and the grizzly moved away from the immediate area. The attack demonstrated typical defensive bear behavior rather than predatory killing, with the bear seeking to eliminate the perceived threat rather than consume prey. Lisa remained trapped inside the damaged tent during the brief but violent encounter, unable to clearly see the attack but hearing the sounds of the struggle. The grizzly bear wandered away from the campsite after David became motionless, returning to investigate the food sources that had originally attracted it to the area. Lisa managed to activate an emergency beacon that summoned search and rescue teams to their remote location. David died from massive trauma to his torso and limbs, along with severe internal injuries caused by the bear's powerful defensive swipes and bites. The investigation revealed that improper food storage had attracted the bear to their campsite, while David's aggressive response had triggered the fatal defensive attack. The trail camera footage was used internally by park rangers for training purposes to better understand bear behavior and human-bear conflict scenarios. David's death led to enhanced enforcement of food storage regulations and mandatory bear safety training for all backcountry campers. The incident became a case study in proper bear encounter protocols within the National Park Service. Lisa survived the encounter but was traumatized by witnessing the initial moments of David's attack and the horrific sounds captured during the brief mauling. The incident highlighted the importance of following established safety protocols when camping in bear country and the critical need for proper food storage in grizzly habitat. It was May 29th, 2018, when the remote backcountry of Glacier National Park in Montana became the scene of a fatal encounter. The wilderness area was experiencing peak spring activity, with snow melting rapidly from higher elevations and creating ideal conditions for wildlife movement. Dense brush and thick forest coverage limited visibility along the narrow hiking trails. Trail 14 had been officially closed to public access due to increased grizzly bear activity reported throughout the previous week. Park rangers had documented multiple sightings of bears with cubs in the area, along with evidence of recent feeding activity near popular hiking routes. Warning signs had been posted at all trail access points. The spring season brought heightened bear activity as animals emerged from winter hibernation in search of food sources. Early morning hours were particularly dangerous, as bears were most active during dawn feeding periods when they sought to replenish energy reserves depleted during the long winter months. Thea Jinks, a 36-year-old landscape photographer, had traveled to Glacier National Park to capture images of the spring wildflower bloom in the high country. Known for her willingness to venture into restricted areas to obtain unique shots, Jinks had a reputation for taking calculated risks to access pristine locations that other photographers avoided. She had arrived at the park specifically to photograph the seasonal transition in the backcountry, aware that the melting snow and emerging vegetation created spectacular but brief photographic opportunities. Jinks was traveling alone that morning, equipped with a chest-mounted camera to document her hiking experience, along with her professional photography equipment. She had deliberately chosen to hike during the early morning hours to capture optimal lighting conditions, despite knowing that this timing coincided with peak wildlife activity periods. Grizzly bears are among North America's most powerful large mammals, capable of reaching speeds of 35 miles per hour and possessing strength that can easily overpower humans. Adult males can weigh over 800 pounds and stand nearly 4 feet tall at the shoulder, with claws measuring up to 4 inches in length. During spring months, grizzly bears are particularly aggressive as they establish territories and protect food sources after emerging from hibernation. Mothers with cubs display extreme defensive behavior and will attack any perceived threat to their offspring without warning. Their exceptional hearing and sense of smell make them aware of human presence long before visual contact occurs. Grizzly bears typically avoid human contact, but surprise encounters at close range often trigger defensive attacks. Attacks on humans most often occur as defensive responses rather than predatory behavior. Their natural response to perceived threats involves overwhelming force designed to neutralize danger quickly and decisively. Jinx made a fatal error by hiking alone on a closed trail during peak bear activity hours. Her quiet movement through dense brush eliminated any opportunity for bears to detect and avoid her presence. The lack of noise deterrents or bear spray further compromised her safety in an environment with confirmed aggressive bear activity. The encounter occurred suddenly as Jinx rounded a bend in the trail, where thick vegetation limited visibility to just a few yards. A large grizzly bear emerged from the brush at extremely close range, likely as surprised by the encounter as Jinx herself. The sudden close-range encounter triggered a defensive charge. The animal covered the short distance between them in seconds, striking Jinx with devastating force that knocked her to the ground instantly. The initial impact alone caused severe trauma, as the bear's massive weight and momentum overwhelmed her completely. The bear delivered an explosive series of strikes, using its powerful claws and crushing bite force. Each blow inflicted massive internal injuries and bone fractures, while the animal's weight prevented any possibility of escape or defense. The assault was brief but catastrophic, typical of defensive grizzly encounters. The attack caused catastrophic damage to vital organs and major blood vessels. The bear's claws created deep lacerations across Jinx's torso and limbs, while the crushing force of its strikes caused severe internal bleeding and organ failure. The chest-mounted camera was damaged during the encounter, though the device provided investigators with some information about the final moments before the attack. Death resulted from the combination of massive blunt force trauma, internal bleeding, and organ failure within minutes of the initial contact. Park rangers discovered Jinx's body during a routine patrol of the closed trail area later that day. The scene and physical evidence provided crucial information about the circumstances of the encounter and the bear's defensive behavior during the attack. The incident prompted a comprehensive review of trail closure enforcement procedures and led to enhanced warning systems throughout Glacier National Park. Jinx's family filed wrongful death claims, though investigations ultimately determined that proper warnings had been posted and the trail closure had been clearly marked.